The envelope I handed my son-in-law was designed to detonate a carefully constructed lie, and it worked better than I could have imagined. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. When I finally returned from my business trip, I stumbled upon a family album from which I had been meticulously excised, with a cruel inscription left behind. "Worst grandfather in the world." The familiar rumble of the taxi's engine died down as we pulled up to the curb in front of a handsome red brick colonial in the quiet Philadelphia suburbs. I settled the fare with the driver, my mind a blend of satisfaction and weariness. The History Education Conference in Atlanta had been a resounding success, culminating in an academic excellence award that felt like the capstone of my 40-year career as a professor. It was a tangible validation of all the late nights, the missed social events, the sacrifices I'd poured into my work and my life. The driver kindly helped me with my suitcase from the trunk. "Have a great day, Professor," he said with a respectful nod. "Thank you," I replied, my gaze fixed on my daughter's home. The lights inside cast a warm, inviting glow, and I could see figures moving behind the undrawn curtains. It was a crisp Sunday afternoon, and I had promised my daughter Amelia that I would stop by to see the grandchildren as soon as I got back. With my suitcase rolling behind me, I walked up the stone path, a mixture of travel fatigue and keen anticipation coursing through me. I was eager to tell Sophie and Leo about the award. At 10 and 8, they might not grasp the full professional weight of it, but I wanted them to know their grandfather had achieved something significant, something to be proud of. I pressed the doorbell, and the cheerful chime was followed by the sound of thundering footsteps. The door flew open. "Grandpa!" Sophie shouted, launching herself into my arms. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a charmingly messy braid, and she was wearing a bright yellow dress I'd sent her for Christmas. "Hello, my darling," I said, bending down to give her a proper hug, consciously ignoring the familiar protest from my knee. A faithful companion after any long journey. "Mom, Grandpa's here," she hollered back into the house. Amelia appeared at the end of the hall, dressed casually in jeans and a faded university sweatshirt. "Hi, Dad," she said, approaching for a quick, perfunctory hug. "How was the conference?" "It was marvelous. I began, but my story was cut short as Leo came tearing down the staircase. "Grandpa!" he yelled, wrapping his small arms tightly around my legs. "My boy," I chuckled, ruffling his hair. "You've grown another inch, I swear." "Kids, let your grandfather get in the door," a voice called from the direction of the kitchen. It was Ryan, my son-in-law. He emerged, wiping his hands on a dish towel, a practiced smile on his face that, as always, failed to reach his eyes. It never did. Not with me. "Hello, Ryan," I said, maintaining a polite tone. "I hope I'm not interrupting dinner preparations." "Not at all," he replied, though his clipped tone suggested otherwise. "We're just getting a roast in the oven. You're welcome to stay." The invitation hung in the air, heavy with reluctance, a familiar dance we'd performed for years. In the 11 years since Ryan had become a part of Amelia's life, our relationship had been perpetually lukewarm. Initially, I chalked it up to his own difficult past. He'd lost his father young and had a strained relationship with his stepfather. I reasoned that perhaps he viewed me as some sort of rival for patriarchal authority. But after more than a decade, I understood the truth. The issue wasn't anything I did. It was my very existence. I was a man who had forged a career, who was still passionate about my work past the age of 60, who held the conviction that a man could offer the world more than just the role of a provider. "I'd love to stay for dinner," I replied, choosing to ignore the palpable tension for the sake of my grandchildren. They were the only reason I was here. Amelia took my suitcase. "I'll just put this in the guest room. How long are you staying?" "Just for the night. I have lectures to prepare for on Tuesday." I noticed she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Something felt different, a strangeness that went beyond the usual friction with Ryan. "Grandpa, come see the new volcano I built for my science project." Leo tugged insistently on my hand, pulling me toward the living room. As I followed his enthusiastic lead, my eyes fell on something on the coffee table. It was a large, handsome photo album, bound in rich brown leather, with the words, "Our Family," embossed in elegant gold lettering. "What's this?" I asked. My curiosity piqued as I reached down to pick it up. "Oh, that's the new album Dad made," Sophie explained from the doorway. "He said it's really important to preserve our family memories." A knot of unease tightened in my stomach at the way she said it. I opened the heavy cover and began to leaf through the first few pages. There were glossy photos of Amelia and Ryan's wedding, snapshots of Sophie and Leo's births, chaotic birthday parties, and sun-drenched family vacations. But then, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. In group photos where I knew I had been standing, there were now conspicuous gaps. Pictures had been crudely cut or digitally altered, leaving behind ghostly voids where I should have been. I stopped at a photo from Sophie's 6th birthday party. An empty space stood right next to Amelia. The memory was vivid. I had baked a special 3-layer chocolate cake for her that day. My heart began to beat faster. I flipped more pages, a sense of dread growing with each one. Christmas gatherings, Thanksgiving dinners, school events, every single family milestone had been rewritten, my presence systematically purged from the record. On the very last page, a single sentence was written in a flowing, elegant script, the black ink. A stark contrast against the cream-colored paper. The words made my blood run cold. "The worst grandfather in the world doesn't deserve a place in our memories." I looked up from the book. My breath caught in my throat, utterly stunned. Ryan was standing in the doorway, a faint, triumphant smirk playing on his lips as he watched my reaction. Our eyes met. His gaze was cold, challenging. Mine was a storm of hurt and disbelief. "Children," Ryan said, his voice smooth, never breaking eye contact with me, "go on upstairs and wash your hands for dinner." When I heard their footsteps retreating up the stairs, I carefully placed the album back on the table. "Why?" The word came out as a strangled whisper. "Don't play the innocent victim, Arthur," he shot back, crossing his arms over his chest. "You know exactly why. A real grandfather would be present. A real grandfather would put his family before his career. I won't have my children thinking your selfish priorities are something to admire. You have no right." I started, my voice trembling with a rage I hadn't felt in years. But I was cut off by Amelia's return. Her eyes darted from my face to the album, and her expression turned ashen. "Dad, I can explain." "You knew about this?" I asked, the betrayal in her silence slicing deeper than any of Ryan's malicious actions. "It wasn't her idea," Ryan interjected quickly. "It was mine. But she agreed that the children need positive role models in their lives. Examples of people who truly put family first." I stared at my daughter, the little girl I had raised on my own after her mother left us. The girl for whom I'd worked 2 jobs to ensure she had a college education. The woman who now stood by and allowed her husband to systematically erase her own father from their family's history. "Amelia?" I said, my voice cracking. She stared at the floor, unable to look at me. "It's complicated, Dad." In that single devastating moment, something inside of me fractured. But through that fracture, something else, Something harder and more resilient began to form. I looked from the hateful album to Ryan's smug face, to my daughter's averted eyes, and I made a decision. This would not be the final word. "All right," I said, my voice surprisingly firm. "You want to erase me? Let's see if you can erase what I truly am." I picked up my briefcase and went upstairs to see my grandchildren before dinner. As I hugged Sophie and listened to Leo chatter about his science project, my mind was already racing, formulating a plan. That album wasn't just an insult. It was the physical manifestation of Ryan's long-term campaign to alienate me from my own grandchildren. Well, he had started a game, and I, having just won an award for academic excellence, knew a thing or two about research, documentation, and the powerful art of presenting irrefutable evidence. I sat down at the dinner table that night, a serene and determined smile on my face, while my mind began to assemble the contents of an envelope that would change everything. That night, lying awake in the guest bedroom after a painfully awkward dinner, where Ryan held court and Amelia studiously avoided my gaze, my thoughts were a raging torrent. The ceiling fan spun in lazy circles above me, its soft whirring no match for the storm in my mind. My memory drifted back decades, to a time when it was just Amelia and me against the world. I was 32 when her mother left. Amelia was just 7, a quiet girl with her mother's eyes and my own stubborn streak. I can still picture the note she left on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore. Don't look for me." No proper goodbye, just a coward's farewell on a scrap of paper. The rent was due, and suddenly, I was a single father with a mountain of bills and a heartbroken little girl asking when Mommy was coming home. "She had to go away for work, sweetheart," I'd told her, my own tears held back by sheer force of will as I tucked her into bed. The next morning, I called Professor Davenport at the university. "I'll take that full-time teaching position," I said, abandoning my plans for a more manageable schedule. "And if there are any evening courses open, I'll take those as well." For the next 5 years, my life was a whirlwind of lecture halls, late-night grading sessions, and frantic drives to pick Amelia up from after-school care. I vividly remember her school plays, where I'd be perched in the back row, still in my tweed jacket, often arriving just as the curtain was rising because a student had needed extra help during office hours. One cold winter evening when Amelia was 12, I came home to find her struggling with her math homework at the kitchen table. "Why don't you ask one of your friends for help?" I asked, dropping my heavy briefcase full of essays onto the counter. "What friends?" she mumbled without looking up. That night, I wept in the shower, the sound of the water muffling my sobs as I faced the true cost of my choices. My daughter was growing up lonely while I worked myself to the bone to provide for us. The very next day, I rearranged my entire schedule, turning down a prestigious offer to chair a department committee. Instead, I started hosting study groups at our apartment every Thursday evening. I bought snacks I couldn't really afford and watched with quiet relief as Amelia slowly, cautiously began to form friendships. When she graduated from high school, she was accepted into a great university with a partial scholarship. I covered the rest, draining the savings account where I'd squirreled away every spare dollar for over a decade. "You don't have to do this, Dad," she'd said, her eyes wide as she looked at the tuition bill. "Yes, I do," I replied, signing the check without hesitation. "This is what matters." The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. As I stared at the shadows dancing on the guest room ceiling, Ryan had called me selfish. Yet every single major decision in my professional life had been made with Amelia's well-being at its core. She met Ryan during her senior year of college. I was happy for her. He was handsome, confident, a communications major with ambitious plans. I remember our first meeting at a little cafe. He smiled politely as Amelia told him I was a professor. "How interesting," he'd said, but his eyes had glazed over the moment she mentioned my latest publication. After they married, the distance between Amelia and me grew. Ryan always seemed to have a ready excuse for why they couldn't visit. The house was being renovated, the kids were under the weather, the timing was just never right. I tried desperately to bridge that growing chasm. I sent thoughtful gifts for the children, called on every birthday, offered financial help when I heard Amelia was between jobs. When Sophie was born, I took a full semester of unpaid leave to help them. Ryan seemed appreciative at first, but a palpable tension soon filled their home. "I think I've got this handled," he'd say dismissively whenever I suggested a technique for soothing the baby's colic. I backed off, not wanting to overstep my bounds. The memory that stung the most came rushing back now. Sophie's 4th birthday. I had asked Amelia what to get her. "She's obsessed with dinosaurs right now," she'd told me. I spent weeks hunting down the perfect gift. A beautifully illustrated pop-up dinosaur encyclopedia. When Sophie opened it at her party, her face lit up. "Look, Mommy, dinosaurs." Ryan had smiled a thin, tight smile. "How educational. Maybe we can look at that when you're a bit older." The book vanished. Months later, when I asked Sophie about it, she just looked at me with a blank expression. "What dinosaur book, Grandpa?" As the first light of dawn filtered through the blinds, I sat up, my course set. The album wasn't an isolated act of cruelty. It was the culmination of years of calculated erasure. Ryan hadn't just cut me out of photographs. He had been systematically cutting me out of my grandchildren's lives. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Frank, it's Arthur. I need your help with something. It's about my grandchildren." My oldest friend, a sharp-witted retired police detective, would know exactly how to proceed. The next morning, I dressed with deliberate care in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks, projecting an image of calm resolve. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Amelia had already left for work, and Ryan was getting the children ready for school. I poured a cup of coffee and my eye caught a stack of mail on the counter. An envelope, decorated with a child's drawing, was addressed to Grandpa Arthur in Sophie's unmistakable handwriting. It had already been opened. Inside was a handmade card with crudely drawn dinosaurs. "I miss you, Grandpa. When are you coming to visit again?" A lump formed in my throat. "Oh, that arrived yesterday," Ryan said, walking into the kitchen. "I was going to give it to you." I carefully slid the card back into the envelope. The postmark is from 3 weeks ago. I said, my voice level. Ryan just shrugged, busying himself at the coffee machine. "Must have gotten lost in the pile. You know how it island?" Before I could press him, Sophie and Leo came bounding in, backpacks on. "Grandpa, you're still here!" Leo cried. "I'm leaving after breakfast, champ," I said. "But I was hoping I could come see your school first." Ryan stiffened. "We're already running late, and the school requires advance approval for visitors." "Actually," I said calmly, "I called the school this morning. As a grandparent on the approved family contact list, I'm permitted to visit any time. Amelia put me on that list years ago." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Fine, but we leave in 10 minutes. The drive was thick with unspoken hostility. At the school, Ryan hustled the children inside, but I managed to give them each a tight hug. "I'll see you both very soon," I promised, my eyes locking with Ryan's in a silent declaration of war. Instead of leaving, I walked directly to the administrative office. "I'm Arthur Miller, Sophie and Leo Bennett's grandfather," I told the receptionist. "I'd like to speak with their teachers." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Mrs. Davis, Sophie's fourth-grade teacher. "Sophie is a delight," she said warmly. "She speaks of you often." My surprise must have been evident. "She does?" Mrs. Davis nodded. "Just last month for show and tell, she brought in a book about great leaders in history. She told the class her grandfather, the professor, had sent it to her." I had to blink back sudden tears. I had sent that book 6 months ago and never knew if she'd received it. The teacher's expression grew more serious. "Mr. Miller, there is something else. Sophie has mentioned missing you. She once told me that her father said you were often too busy with your work to visit." After hearing a nearly identical story from Leo's teacher, I left the school with my heart aching, but my resolve hardened like steel. My next stop was a coffee shop near Amelia's office, where Frank was waiting. "You look like hell, Arthur," he said, ever the diplomat. "Thanks, Frank," I replied, sliding into the booth. He pushed a folder across the table. "Your son-in-law has been a busy man." Inside were printouts from Ryan's private social media accounts, which Frank had accessed through a mutual acquaintance. Post after post painted me as the aloof, career-obsessed grandfather. There were laments about how Grandpa canceled again, posted on dates I had never even been invited. "There's more?" Frank said gently. "I spoke with your neighbor, Mrs. Gable, the one who keeps an eye on your house. She said that over the past few years, several packages addressed to your grandchildren have been returned to your doorstep while you were away. She's been holding them for you." The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. The birthday gifts that were never acknowledged. The Christmas presents met with polite but distant thank yous. They had never even received them. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would he do this?" Frank reached out and patted my hand. "Some people are black holes of affection, Arthur. They need to be the absolute center of their family's universe." I thought of Sophie's intercepted card, of her proudly showing her class the book I sent. All the stolen moments. The pain was sharp, but it was being replaced by a cold, clear purpose. "What's your next move?" Frank asked. I took a deep breath. "I'm going to get my grandchildren back." On the drive home, I made 2 calls. The first was to my lawyer, requesting documented proof of all the financial support I'd provided to Amelia and Ryan. The down payment on their house, the substantial loan when Amelia was laid off, the monthly deposits into the children's college funds. The second call was to Amelia. "Dad, is everything okay? You left this morning without saying goodbye." "I thought it best," I said carefully. "Amelia, we need to talk. Not on the phone. Dinner, just us, next Friday." "I don't know, Dad. Ryan won't." "This is not a request, Amelia. This is important." There was a long pause. Finally, she reluctantly agreed. I hung up and drove to my house. An hour later, I was sitting in my living room, surrounded by a heartbreaking collection of unopened gifts, books, science kits, handcrafted souvenirs from my travels, each one a message of love that had been intercepted and returned to sender. I picked up a small wooden music box I had bought for Sophie's last birthday. It played a delicate Debussy piece. I noticed the lid was slightly warped, as if it had been pried open and then forced shut. Someone had inspected it before sending it back. That night, I began to assemble the contents of the envelope. It had to be undeniable. It had to be definitive. Most of all, it had to be powerful enough to tear down the walls Ryan had built. The dinner with Amelia almost didn't happen. She called twice to reschedule, her excuses growing flimsier each time. It was only when I mentioned I was considering selling my house, the home she grew up in, that she finally agreed to meet at an old Italian restaurant we both loved. "You're not really selling the house, are you?" she asked nervously after we'd ordered. "That depends entirely on this conversation," I said. "Amelia, I need you to tell me why you have allowed Ryan to cut me out of my own grandchildren's lives." "You're exaggerating, Dad. Ryan just thinks the kids need consistency." "Is that why he tells them I cancel visits I know nothing about? Or why he sends back every gift I've ever sent them?" Her head snapped up. "What are you talking about?" I slid a folder across the table. "Either your husband has been lying to you, or you have been lying to yourself. Either way, our children are being hurt." She opened the folder. Inside were photos of the returned gifts, screenshots of Ryan's social media posts, and written statements from the children's teachers. "This could all be a misunderstanding," she stammered, but her voice held no conviction. "There's more," I said, producing copies of my bank statements. "The down payment for your house, the loan, the college funds." I let that sink in. I never held these over your head, because that's not what family does. But now that I'm being painted as a man who puts his career before his own blood, it seems relevant. Her face crumpled. Dead eye. "Why, Amelia? Why have you let this happen?" She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture that took me right back to her childhood. "Ryan, he had a really difficult upbringing," she began. "His father was incredibly harsh, always critical. After the divorce, his stepfather wanted nothing to do with him. He felt abandoned. So he's punishing me for the sins of his family?" "No," she sighed. "He's terrified of the children being hurt like he was. He sees your career, your traveling, as proof that you could just abandon them emotionally." "Amelia, look at me. Have I ever, in your entire life, given you any reason to believe I would abandon Sophie and Liam?" She couldn't meet my gaze. "No, but Ryan is convinced your work will always come first. When you missed Leo's kindergarten play, I was in the hospital with pneumonia," I interrupted sharply, "and I sent a video message for him that I now suspect he never saw." Her shoulders slumped in defeat. "I didn't know that." "There's a lot you don't know, Amelia, because you've chosen not to see it." "What do you want from me?" she finally asked. "I want you to be a mother and protect your children. I want you to stop enabling your husband's destructive behavior. And I want a real, unfiltered relationship with my grandchildren." "He'll never agree to that." "Then he leaves me no other option." "What does that mean?" she asked, her eyes wide with alarm. I didn't answer directly. "Do you remember when you were 10 and the neighbor's dog bit you? You begged me not to report it. I respected your wishes, but then that same dog bit another child, much more severely. I have regretted that decision my entire life. I will not make the same mistake with Sophie and Liam. The emotional damage he is inflicting stops now." I stood to leave. "Dad, please," she begged, grabbing my wrist. "Let me talk to him first." "You've had 11 years to talk to him, Amelia. The time for talking is over." The following Sunday, I called Ryan directly. "Arthur," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "Amelia's not here right now." "I'm not calling for Amelia. I'm calling to let you know that I will be attending Leo's science fair this afternoon." After a beat of silence, he said, "We didn't think you'd be interested." "I am always interested in my grandchildren's lives. I'll see you there at 4. I hung up before he could object. That afternoon, I placed the meticulously organized manila envelope into my briefcase alongside a small package wrapped in silver paper. My years in academia had taught me the power of timing and presentation. The science fair was the perfect venue because I had learned from a school newsletter that they were hosting a small family dinner at their house afterward to celebrate Leo's project and Ryan's parents' anniversary. The perfect audience for the perfect reckoning. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. It was about my grandchildren's right to have all the people who love them fully present in their lives. The envelope was ready. Tomorrow, everything would change. The elementary school gymnasium was a chaotic symphony of childish excitement and parental pride. I arrived early, my briefcase a heavy, solid weight in my hand. I spotted Leo in a far corner, nervously fiddling with a large papier-mâché volcano. Standing beside him was Ryan, impeccably dressed, looking more like he was about to close a deal than attend a school function. Amelia was nowhere in sight. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I walked toward them. Leo saw me first. "Grandpa, you came!" he shouted, a brilliant smile spreading across his face as he ran to me. "Of course I did, champ," I said, hugging him tightly. I wouldn't miss this for the world. Over his shoulder, I saw Ryan's smile was a thin, brittle line. "Arthur, this is a surprise." "Is it?" "I believe I told you I was coming." I turned my attention back to Leo. "Now, tell me everything about this magnificent volcano." For the next 15 minutes, I was completely absorbed as Leo passionately explained his creation, his knowledge of chemical reactions and volcanic geology impressive for an 8-year-old. "This is outstanding work, Leo," I said, genuinely proud. "You should be very proud of yourself." "Thanks, Grandpa. Mom helped with the painting, but I did all the science." "Speaking of your mother," Ryan interjected, checking his phone. "She just texted. She's running late at work, but should be here soon." Leo's face fell. "She promised she wouldn't miss it." "Meetings run long, buddy," Ryan said smoothly. "You know how important Mom's job island?" The hypocrisy was staggering. The very excuse he had used to slander me was perfectly acceptable for Amelia. "Well, I'm here," I said, giving Leo's shoulder a squeeze. "And I brought you something." I opened my briefcase and handed him the silver package. "We don't really do gifts at school events," Ryan said stiffly. "It's directly related to his project," I replied coolly. Leo tore open the paper to reveal a large illustrated book, Volcanoes of the World. "Whoa," he breathed, his eyes wide as he flipped through the dramatic photographs. "This is so cool. I thought it might give you some ideas for your next project." I said, "There's an inscription for you inside." He turned to the title page and read the words I had written. "For my brilliant grandson Leo, whose curiosity and intelligence will move mountains. With all my love, Grandpa Arthur." "Thank you," he whispered, tracing the words with his finger. Ryan reached for the book. "Here, let me put this in my bag so it doesn't get lost." "Actually," I said, "I think Leo might want to show it to the judges. It shows a deeper interest in the subject matter." Before Ryan could protest, the principal announced that the judging was about to begin. Leo, clutching his new book, hurried back to his display. Ryan turned to me, his voice a low hiss. "What do you think you're doing, Arthur?" "I'm being a grandfather," I replied simply. Amelia arrived just as the judges reached Leo's table. I watched from a distance as my grandson confidently explained his project, using the book to point out real-world examples. Amelia's face glowed with pride, though she shot me a confused look when she noticed the book. Leo ended up winning an honorable mention ribbon, and he was ecstatic. As people began to file out, Ryan announced the dinner at their house. "Arthur, you're welcome to join us," he said, the invitation clearly forced by our public setting. "My parents are coming to celebrate their anniversary as well." "How very thoughtful of you to include me," I said, my tone polite but edged with steel. Dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Ryan dominated the conversation, making pointed remarks about the importance of traditional family values and being present. His parents, Patricia and George, were pleasant people whom I'd met only a handful of times. Amelia was quiet and withdrawn, her eyes constantly flitting between Ryan and me. After a toast to family, the moment arrived. "Before we continue," I said, my voice cutting through the light chatter, "I have something I'd like to share." Every head turned in my direction. I placed the thick manila envelope on the center of the table. "This is for you, Ryan." He stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. "What is this?" "Open it," I said. "I think everyone here will find it illuminating." With hesitant fingers, he opened the flap and pulled out a series of neatly labeled folders. Returned gifts, intercepted communications, financial support, false social media claims, teacher statements. His face went pale as he saw the photographs of the unopened packages. "What is all this?" his father, George, asked, leaning in. "It's evidence," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Evidence of a long and systematic campaign to erase me from my grandchildren's lives." Amelia grabbed the second folder, her expression crumbling as she read copies of emails and texts I had sent her, messages she had claimed to have never received. "Dad, I don't understand." "Don't you, Amelia? For years, your husband has intercepted my gifts, hidden my messages, lied to our children about my availability, and portrayed me as an absent grandfather, all while I was providing significant financial support to this family." "This is absurd," Ryan sputtered. "You're just trying to stir up trouble." "No, Ryan. I am simply presenting the facts." I turned to my grandchildren, who were watching with wide, confused eyes. "Sophie, Leo, did you ever get the birthday presents I sent you last year? Or the Christmas gifts?" Sophie's brow furrowed. "You sent us presents?" "Many," I confirmed, "along with letters and invitations to visit me. None of which, it seems, you ever received." Ryan shot to his feet. "Children, go to your rooms, now." "No," I said firmly. "They stay. They have been lied to about me for years. They deserve to hear the truth." The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "How dare you?" Ryan seethed. "Come into my home and make these accusations in front of my family?" I met his furious gaze without flinching. "How dare you steal my relationship with my own grandchildren and then write in a family album that I am the worst grandfather in the world?" A sharp gasp came from his mother, Patricia. Sophie's eyes widened in recognition. "Is that what this is about?" Ryan scoffed, though his voice trembled. "That stupid album?" "No," I said. "This is about the truth. And it is long past time that everyone here heard it." The ensuing silence was absolute, broken only by the soft scrape of Sophie's chair as she stood up to get a closer look at the evidence that was about to change our family forever. Emma stood beside me, her small fingers tracing the edges of a photograph, showing an unopened board game I'd sent for Leo's birthday. "This is absurd," Ryan repeated, but the conviction had drained from his voice. "You're twisting things." "The evidence speaks for itself," I said. Michael picked up a copy of the check I'd written for their down payment. "Mom, I never knew it was this much," he murmured. "Ryan, what is going on?" his father, Donald, demanded. "It's nothing, Dad. Eleanor is just bitter because she's not the center of attention. Is that why you told me Grandma canceled our trip to the museum last summer?" Emma's small voice cut through the tension. She didn't really cancel, did she? Ryan's face flushed a deep red. Emma, you don't understand. I understand that you lied, she shot back, her face crumpling. I cried all day because I thought Grandma didn't want to see me. Michael stood, his hands shaking as he gathered the papers. We need to talk about this in private, Ryan. There's nothing to talk about, he snapped. Eleanor shows up once or twice a year and thinks she has the right to judge how I raise my children. They're my children too, Michael. His voice was firmer than I'd heard it in a decade. Darling, perhaps we should go, Marilyn said to her son. No, your family, Ryan insisted, gesturing wildly. She is the outsider here. My mother is family, Michael said, his voice ringing with newfound authority. She always has been. Ryan's composure finally broke. You're taking her side? After everything I've done for this family? This isn't about sides, Ryan. It's about the truth. Did you hide my mother's gifts? Did you lie about her canceling visits? Ryan's damning silence was all the answer anyone needed. Liam, who had been quiet until now, tugged on his father's shirt. Dad, is Grandpa's new book going to disappear like the dinosaur one did? Michael looked down, confused. The one Grandpa gave me for my birthday. I only got to read it once before Mom said I must have lost it. Michael turned slowly to face his wife, a cold, dawning horror in his eyes. The book was too advanced for him, she said defensively. That wasn't your call to make, Rebecca, he said. And you certainly had no right to lie to him about it. Rebecca, we raised you better than this, her father said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Of course, you all gang up on me, she cried, tears streaming down her face. None of you know what it's like to have to compete with St. Eleanor, the perfect career woman who swoops in with her fancy degrees and expensive gifts. The raw anguish in her voice gave me a moment of pause. Beneath all the venom and deceit was a deeply insecure woman, terrified of being seen as less than. I have never competed with you, Rebecca, I said softly. I only ever wanted to be a grandmother. You missed school plays. You weren't there when Liam broke his arm. Because I was never told, I countered, or I was deliberately given the wrong dates and times. The evidence is right there. Michael stepped between us. This stops. Now. He turned to his in-laws. Donald, Marilyn, I'm so sorry, but I think it's best if we end the evening here. They nodded grimly and left. Michael then sent the children upstairs. He sank into a chair, looking utterly defeated. I don't even know where to begin. You can start by asking your wife why she felt the need to cut me out of a family album, I suggested. Because she doesn't deserve them, Rebecca burst out, her voice thick with years of resentment. She got to have her big, important career. And now she wants to play the doting grandmother without doing any of the hard work. My mother was never there for me. My stepmother wanted me gone. And then Eleanor comes along with her awards, and her world travels, and makes me feel like the boring, ordinary mother who never accomplished anything. For the first time, I saw past my own hurt and into the heart of hers. Rebecca, I said gently, being a mother is the most important accomplishment in the world. I know that because I was a single mother who worked 2 jobs, not in spite of my love for Michael, but because of it, I wanted to give him a world of opportunities. I continued, I don't want to compete with you. I want to be a grandmother to your children, to love them in my own way, to share my life with them. This can't go on, Michael said, reaching for his wife's hand. The lying is hurting the children. So now I'm the villain? She sobbed. What I want, I said firmly, is a relationship with my grandchildren built on honesty. We need help, Michael said. Family counseling, like I suggested before, to fix the broken wife, she said bitterly. No, Michael replied, to heal our broken family. I began gathering the contents of the envelope. I didn't come here for revenge, Rebecca. I came for the truth. Footsteps on the stairs announced the children's return. Is Grandma leaving? Emma asked, her voice small. I looked at Michael and then at Rebecca. It was their home, their decision to make. Rebecca wiped her eyes and squared her shoulders. No, she said quietly. Grandma is staying for dessert. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. 6 months later, I sat on my back porch, watching Sophie and Leo chase each other through my garden. They were spending their first full weekend with me, alone. The therapy sessions had been grueling, forcing us all to confront painful truths. Rebecca and I had forged a fragile truce. She was slowly learning to see me not as a rival, but as another source of love for her children. And I was learning to understand the deep-seated fears that drove her. Michael, thankfully, had found his voice and was no longer a passive bystander in his own family. The dinosaur book had mysteriously reappeared, along with a trove of other lost gifts. My calls were now answered, my letters were read, and my visits were welcomed. The Hateful Family album had even been remade. Rebecca had created a new section at the back, titled Grandma Eleanor's Adventures, filled with photos from my career and travels, alongside new pictures of me with the kids. Healing is never a perfect process, but as I watched my grandchildren's joyful play in the golden afternoon light, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The original album now sits on my bookshelf, a stark reminder not of the pain of exclusion, but of the power of truth to restore what was nearly lost forever. The envelope that had forced the reckoning remains in my desk, a weapon I hope to never wield again. Some might call what happened forgiveness. I prefer to think of it as a restoration of dignity, of truth, and of family bonds far too precious to ever let go of again. The inscription I wrote in Leo's volcano book now feels like a prophecy. Knowledge and truth, much like lava, will always find their way to the surface. And when they do, they change the landscape forever. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.